What is up? This is Black Wrestlers You Should Know. I'm Randy Ritchie. This is sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling, and today we're going to recognize Ron Simmons. Ron Simmons was considered one of Florida State's greatest recruiting victories when he signed out of high school. Simmons played 4 years as a defensive nose guard at FSU under coach Bobby Bowden. He later had a brief career in the National Football League, selected in the sixth round of the 1981 NFL Draft. He played for the Cleveland Browns in 1981 and 82 and the USFL's Tampa Bay Bandits from 83 to 85. And it was in Tampa where he was a teammate of future professional wrestler Lex Luger. Things I didn't know. I didn't know that Ron was only 7 years older than me. I know to you as kids that seems like a long time. But at my age, it really doesn't. So, I'm looking for all this information that I'm trying to not be exclusive with, but fill you guys in on what you should know about Ron Simmons and don't know about Ron Simmons. And you guys know I train professional wrestlers. That's what Premier Pro Wrestling is. I don't have to talk about my accolades, but I will. Adam Pearce from World Wrestling Federation, World Wrestling Entertainment, has credited me on WWE.com for training him. CM Punk had his first professional wrestling match for me. That's all I've really got to say to be taken credible. When I train these guys, I expect them to know the history of the lineage of the industry. And when someone's name comes up like Ron Simmons, who is one of the greats, who the alleged quote woke end quote wrestling sites and even the woke Wikipedia, go to those pages. There's nothing really about the man from a personal standpoint. They say in blue highlighted print on Wikipedia, he was a one-time world champion, and then in regular text, he was the first black world recognized world champion. That was a huge deal to be the first black professional wrestling world champion. So I get so tired of hearing about wokeness and how unwoke I am. But when the truth comes out and you start going on the internet, go ahead and Google Ron Simmons. There ain't shit about this guy. Compared to, and in comparison to, what an impact he's had on the sport. Ron Simmons could have been white, but with his athleticism and his accomplishments before he entered the sport of wrestling, he had the makings of a champion. Now, things you don't know about Ron Simmons are how teachable and coachable Ron Simmons was when he got to NWA/WCW. And you can see in his first probably 100 matches on television how teachable, how coachable, and how eager to learn this man was, because this man thinks like a champion in the real life. And a champion is somebody that can look at this industry not from their little fragile ego, but the fact of the matter is it's a business and he's going to make as much as he can before he had to hang up his boots. And that's exactly what the F happened. Now, I saw him have matches with everybody, and I saw him not hurt people. That's a first telltale sign. Today, that being teachable and being coachable, you don't get it. Those aren't just throwaway words by World Wrestling Entertainment's developmental system. Ron Simmons, I'll say it again, could have been a white guy built like that. Okay? And with his work ethic and his pre wrestling accolades and his training regimen, he could have been a world champion. He always had the makings. Now, what's great about the fact that he is black is he was the first one to go ahead and come on out to the forefront and be undeniable, which led the way for a lot of black wrestlers and a lot of black champions ever since. And he should be credited with that. I consider Ron an acquaintance. I've been in a few locker rooms with him. When I first get there, and I've seen him a handful of times, I wouldn't F with him. You don't go to television and mark out for your favesies or mark out for anybody that's on the roster or mark out for anybody that's on SmackDown, Raw, or any other World Wrestling Entertainment television. That's your first fuck up, and you guys do it all the time. So I've seen Ron a few times said hello, a few times maybe introduced or reintroduced myself, and went about my business, and I left the man to do the same. A television taping for World Wrestling Entertainment for somebody on the roster or even not on the roster that aspires to be on the roster is in fact their office, and you don't go in there and try to get them to sign this and selfie that and all that other bullshit. That's what shows everybody that you're a mark and you have no business being there in the first place. So this really happened. I didn't need to do WWE extra work anymore. And I used to get personal phone calls asking me to do so by Chief Jay Strongbow and sometimes Tony Gurria. Sometimes I would turn the work down. I knew that it didn't have legs for me anymore at my age. And at the time, I had an incredibly successful business. But once in a while, I'd say, why not go? Because they called you. Why are they calling you? Go, you idiot. I worked one night at the Rosemont Horizon. They had myself and the man that I credit in part for my training, Sonny Rogers, working a handicap match against a guy who was no wrestler with zero athletic ability, Kurgan. And this match was to be agented by Paul E. Dangerously, or Paul E. Dangerously, or Paul E. Paul has many gifts as far as the wrestling industry goes, but one of those gifts is definitely not agenting. He probably thinks so. He certainly thought so that day, but due to the fact that he's never been in a match, certainly doesn't qualify him to be any kind of agent. And he was frickin' struggling, and the Kurgan guy barely spoke English. The Kurgan guy barely wanted to speak English. The Kurgan guy was the shits. He wasn't real bright. He wasn't what we say in the industry smartened up by any stretch of the imagination. So, all of Paulie's goofy finishes and moves somehow involved Kurgan power slamming me on top of poor Sonny Rogers. I certainly wasn't going to do it. Like I said before, I didn't have to do it. So I gave some people within that office that knew me, the ones that call me, and I told Paulie, I know how to get this guy over. Just let me handle it and deal with it. I promise you, everybody's going to be happy with the outcome, and they were. We got the most out of that idiot that anybody could in that scenario. Paulie was a little pissy with me after that, but like I said, I didn't need him and I didn't need World Wrestling Entertainment, so it really didn't bother me. I didn't by any chance act like a punk or act cocky or let my ego come into play. But when we got back after doing said job, Kurgan just walked off toward his locker room with Paul E. My locker room that day was with Ron Simmons and Big Van Vader. It was just us in a small locker room at the Rosemont Horizon. I guess the Allstate Center now. I went in, I sat down, I looked around, and I said, you know what? Fuck that. Hey, you. Yes, you big dummy. Look, I don't know what country you come from, But when somebody risks their life and limb to put you over, you say thank you. And Ron Simmons lit up like a Roman candle as that big dummy apologized and said thank you. And I thought that was great. It made me feel good. And for the rest of the day, Ron was selling for me. That's the kind of guy that he was. The tapings get toward the end. As I said, it was myself, Ron Simmons, Van Vader. Not a lot of talking being done. A little bit between me and Ron. You know this guy. Oh, yeah, how's that guy? That kind of shit. Where you from? Blah, blah, blah. At the end of the taping, I had 2 bottles of water. One I was drinking out of, one I was going to put into my gym bag to take home after catering had rolled up the carpet. Leon White says, "Hey, brother, would you mind going up there and get me some water?" Now, if anyone asked me to do anything, I would have done that for a fucking referee. I would have done it for just about anyone I can think of. But I don't like Van Vader. I never did like Van Vader. And I believed in my heart that all this tough guy shit was, in fact, a work. Yes, I know he was big and incredibly strong, and I will never take anything away from his drawing power when he was in his prime. What I don't like is the fact that he beat the shit out of a young talent that WWE had their eye on. They were taking this young man with a great body seriously for consideration to be on the talent roster. He beat the shit out of him for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I don't think the match even went up because he fucked his own self up by destroying the guy like he did and doing shit that was totally uncalled for. And then he came back in the locker room and threw a fit to further humiliate this young talent who was better probably as a hand than Vader was at the time because Vader was way past his fucking prime. It always bothered me. So I said, no, I won't go up and get you water. Get your own water. Then he asked me like a prick. And then he threatened me. And I said, Leon, I'm not afraid of you. I think you're full of shit. And I know that ankle is hanging by a thread. Go ahead, put your money where your mouth is. You're probably going to beat my ass, but I know that ankle is hanging by a thread, and you're not going to walk away from this one unscathed, motherfucker. And Ron Simmons backed me the fuck up from that point on. Every time I ran into the man, he remembered that and he'd get that chortle in his eye, and that's the type of guy that he was. He is beyond tough. I would say he's within the top 5 of the real tough guys in the history of the sport with incredible strength, incredible charisma. The things that he did as a young man in wrestling trying to find his way and get over are not done by guys that size. The intensity, the look, and the mastery of Ron Simmons' politics. He's one of those guys that makes me proud to say that I'm a pro wrestler. And all the black young wrestlers listening to this today should study Ron Simmons. I don't care what shape or size you are. There's more to watching wrestling than the fucking moves or the move set. I'm not saying take his move set, talking about his story in the ring, his story outside the ring. And if you could keep up with him as far as work rate went when he was a younger man before he was established, you might stand a chance in this industry. Okay, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm enjoying it. That story about Vader and Kurgan is 110% true. Please note, this again is being brought to you, Black Wrestlers You Should Know, by Premier Pro Wrestling. There are no YouTube commercials or ads on here. So please support Premier Pro Wrestling on Pro Wrestling Tees. Like and subscribe while you're here. And go and take a look at Premier Pro Wrestling on Patreon. The 3 tiers are unbelievably reasonable, especially when you consider the fact we have the most wrestling content on Patreon. Thanks again.